Record. Awesome. Welcome everyone to the Virtual Career Conference. We're so excited that you're here. This might be your first session or your fifth session, but hopefully you're in the right room. Today's session is about if and when to attend graduate school. This is also episode 4 of What the Future Wednesday webinar series, which is focused on the College of Liberal Arts career coaching session. So anybody is welcome. We're so excited you can make it, but it is part of this overall Virtual Career Conference, which we are so pumped to offer for all of our CSU Rams and students. I'll be facilitating today's session with the esteemed Dr. Roze Hentschell, the Associate Dean for Undergraduate Studies in the College of Liberal Arts. We did this topic together because we know a lot about it. Again, my name is Kelsey Schultz. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the Career Education Manager for the College of Liberal Arts. And again, in addition to being the host for this session, I'm also going to be helping facilitate the nuts and bolts of it. So again, it's an hour-long session with a lot of content. And Roze and I will have you use the chat box to interact with us throughout. And at the end, we'll have a discussion section, or we can show you how to engage with us if you don't want to just use the chat box. But don't be shy about asking any questions. The chat box only goes to me. The session is also recorded. So if you miss it, or if you miss something, know that there will be a recording shared after the conference. And I'll put a link into the chat box so that you can find where that is afterwards. But like I said, we are excited to engage with you. We want you to ask questions. We're so pumped to do this topic, and we're just going to get started. So Roze, do you want to introduce yourself on this next slide?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm really glad to see so many of you joining us today. My name is Roze Hentschell. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am finishing up my 18th year at CSU, which is crazy. I'm in the English department, and I also currently serve as the Associate Dean for Undergraduate Studies in the College of Liberal Arts. I oversee all the undergraduate programs, and I'm here today because this is a topic I'm really passionate about. I really love to help students who are thinking about going to graduate school. I've served on many graduate acceptance committees and reviewing applications, and so I know a lot about it from that end. I've also, of course, been to graduate school and I've applied, and I know it from that end as well. That was kind of a long time ago, unfortunately, but I do stay up on what are the best practices around applications for grad school. And one thing I can tell you is that nationally, we always see an uptick in graduate applications and interest when we see a downturn in the economy. And I'm quite certain that we're going to be seeing that again. And so we want to make sure that our students, our CSU students, are really well poised when you go on to apply for graduate programs.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned before, I'm a career education manager for the College of Liberal Arts. My background is in psychology, communication, which at my institution was in the liberal arts. So that was, I've been embedded in the liberal arts for a long time, and a master's degree in college student personnel. So Roze and I bring a variety of perspectives to this. And as a career educator, I think that there's lots of different ways to think about this decision, and we want to make sure you feel informed so that you can move forward making awesome choices for yourself and not fear-based ones. So courageous, informed decisions so that you can be a boss and change the world. And with that, so today's session these are kind of our main points that we're going to be going over today. Again, it is called If and When to Go to Grad School. So the hope is that we're trying to give you some information so that to help inform your decision. However, because both of us have a dearth of knowledge about this subject, we do include tips throughout about the application process. So again, we'll start with the decision-making process, then we'll have a reflection section, then we'll get into some of the grad school components and application process pieces. What are gap years and why should I not be afraid of them potentially? If you are, I see you. And again, how can we think of multiple versions of our life and who's in our corner to help us move forward? So like I said, that's a lot of information. And again, this will be recorded, so if you need more time to process it, please do so. And I'm a big fan of screenshots. So we are not going to be taking it personally if you take a screenshot, especially because some of the slides are pretty heavy in content. But again, don't be shy about asking questions, and I promise that there are no dumb ones, and we will tell you if they are. We will make sure to address them, because if you're thinking it, probably other people are too. Okay, so let's cruise forward. All right, decision-making process. So I just wanted to make sure to include this slide, and I'm actually gonna launch a poll. But sometimes, again, as a career educator, students in the liberal arts come to my office and say, what should I do with my life? What can I do with this degree? And I'm like, honey, do you think I have a crystal ball, right? So my favorite career coaching question to ask students is, what do I need in order to answer this question or address this need? And often we don't even know what we need, right? Like we're like, I don't know, that's why I came to you, fool. So these are, I made a list of some of the ideas or things that students often share or discover that their needs are. So I'm gonna launch a poll right now, and I wanna hear from you all so that we can shape our content today. What do you think you need in order to make a decision about graduate school? Is it, I don't know what my career goals are and how I'm gonna get there? I need more time to decide. Like maybe I just feel overwhelmed and there's too much going on. Resources, like I don't even know where to start, what is part of this process, etc. So again, I did launch a poll, so feel free to vote in there. We will see your responses. Excellent. Okay, great. And again, knowledge, like why is this valuable? Why should I do it? Financial, like, excuse me, how much is this going to cost? What's the bill? Or I need to hear from someone who's been there or currently going through it. Or I do not believe in myself. Like, I think I can make a decision, but I want to do it right. Awesome. Okay, great. We're getting a ton of responses, and you can choose as many that are relevant for you. Great. Okay, I'm going to share this just so you can see. Wow, right? So we have about 50% of folks say it's financial. So we'll make sure to spend a lot of time on that financial aid slide. But yeah, resources, how do I start? What's up? Like, I need more time. So hopefully throughout this session, we'll address some of these pieces. But if something's missing, ask a question, or at the end, make sure that you make an appointment or a drop-in, because we're here to support you. Okay? It is scary. It can feel overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be, and you're not alone. Okay. So like I said, hopefully today we can address some of those concerns, but we're going to keep cruising. Okay, so as you sit with those needs, the first thing that came up for a lot of folks was reflection, right? So I have a lot of students who come to me and say, I want to go to grad school because I don't know what else I'm going to do, right? So what I want you to do, and I would encourage you all to screenshot this slide and think about these 4 questions overall, but for now, I want you to focus on the first 2 questions. I'm going to pause the recording and give us 2 minutes because I want everyone to jot down a response to the first 2 questions. It could be in whatever format you want, but I'm going to pause the recording. Awesome. So we got a couple comments from folks. Thank you again for sharing, and feel free to keep sharing throughout the session. You're not interrupting anything. But a couple things folks brought up is that they're interested in grad school because they can't get the pinpointed instruction in undergrad. So like they want that specialized, focused attention. And another person said that they want to find more opportunities in careers that are research-based. And yeah, if you're interested in research or higher ed, grad school is a great reason to explore that. Okay, but again, some of you might have also looked at these questions and been like, I don't have an answer for that, and that's okay. But again, this is a good starting point that'll shape the rest of your decisions for grad school. So it's a good thing to sit with and keep considering. Okay, so some of us, however, like some objective reasons, right? I know some folks are like, I want a pro-con list. I'm like, boo, okay, I respect you. So we wrote out some pro and cons that are just objectively true about grad school programs. You get a deep knowledge, and someone mentioned, they're like, oh my gosh, I want the pinpointed instruction. I also talk to art students who want more time to develop a portfolio or get more experience in networking. That's a fantastic opportunity to do so. And some jobs like research or higher ed require an advanced degree. So absolutely, it's a great opportunity to go to grad school. Roze and I are nerds. We loved grad school. We think it's great. It's also really hard. So I didn't put that in the cons, but grad school's hard. There's also application costs. So some folks might not be able to afford like the exams and this and that. We'll go over some of those logistics. There could be potential student loans, or if you don't have enough education or too much education and not enough experience, depending on your field, you might be overqualified and underqualified at the same time. So something that I want you all to sit with as a question, and again, feel free to screenshot anything that makes sense to you, is what would be your priorities for a grad program? What would be your must-have, would be nice, and absolutely not walk away reasons for choosing a grad program? Because that might make it more informed and relevant to your particular story and what you're looking for. And now I'm going to pass it off to Roze, who's going to talk about, okay, yeah, but like, how do I apply to this stuff and what is it? So she's going to go into detail about those things. And if you have any questions throughout, please share in the chat box.
Okay. So there's a lot that goes into an application, and I know that a lot of these screens are very content heavy, and so I'm going to try to hit the highlights with the knowledge that you can ask questions in the follow-up, and and even if you want to ask me after this session, I'm happy to respond to you. And I can even talk to you about my own experience. I was in grad school for a really long time, so I have lots of experience to build on. So the application process checklist is something, the very first thing is really figure out why you're doing it. And that's why we started this session with that reflection, because we know that that's at the core of anything you want to do. I personally was not particularly reflective about why I was doing it. I was graduating from college in another time of a terrible economy. And I didn't have a lot of tools personally. I didn't have a career coach like Kelsey to help me really reflect on that. I don't think I would have done anything differently, and it all worked out really well for me. But I look back and I think, man, if I had been a little bit more self-reflective about why I was doing this, I might have, I guess, mitigated some struggles that I went through in grad school. The first step is really to start thinking about the programs you're looking for, and I'm going to get into that, what I mean by program, and also where in the country I want to be, what kinds of programs am I going to be working during the program? Am I going to be full-time? You're going to have to ask all those kinds of questions of yourself. And then you're going to really start to hone the list. I really recommend that while you're going through this process of thinking about graduate school, that you talk to at least two respected faculty members, potentially in fields that you're interested in studying, and really get a general sense of what they think the field looks like. And then finally, think about the actual components of the application process. You're going to hear us say this really a lot, which is that every program's a little bit different. And the most important thing for you to do is be very deliberate about looking at that particular program's requirements. And some of the application components are listed here, whether it's a resume/CV. CV is simply short for curriculum vitae, and that's essentially an academic resume. It's Latin for essentially your academic life story. There's graduate exams. I'll talk about the GRE in a minute, recommendations, essays, writing samples, or potentially a portfolio, and transcripts as well. The pandemic planning. I will say that probably some programs are really being self-reflective about how many applicants they're letting in. So it's just a matter of going on and making sure that you understand what that particular program at that institution is doing. I can speak for CSU. At the moment, we're not changing anything about the application process from the expectations from previous years. As the uncertainties of whether courses are going to be online in the fall at different institutions, that's still very up in the air. And I will say one of the other things that you want to think about, for some of you, there are totally online programs. We actually have a few here at CSU. And so that's something that you could think about if that's appealing to you. And that actually can work really well if you're planning on simultaneously having a career and pursuing graduate school. If that's the case and you want to do part-time study, you want to make sure that the faculty and the program supports part-time study, because not all programs support that.
Just to briefly address something too, when Roze mentions the two faculty members, we mean faculty members at your current institution. So again, folks that are in your department that can help you with the process, look at your application materials, they're going to be in your corner. And we'll talk more about where faculty can play a role, but that's a great distinction. And if there's a common app, somewhat. So depending on what industry you're going into, for example, like occupational therapy, there is a common app, or speech pathology. Health industries and sometimes law have common application processes, but in the humanities and social sciences, I'm not too familiar with I don't believe that there is one, because it's pretty nuanced.
No. Yeah, the law school one is the common app, that one I know of. And I will just say that there are common elements, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel for every single application. You'll want to tweak it But generally, a lot of the components are going to be same, so you can maximize your time there.
Yes. Okay, well, we're going to keep moving on. Excellent.
Yeah, keep asking, keep the questions coming.
Yeah, this is great.
I think that one of the things we want to make sure that you know when you're getting started is what kind of degree program you're really interested in. So there are many different types of programs, and I'm just going to talk about the most common and the ones that you've probably heard of, which are master's programs and then terminal degrees. Master's programs are most typically MA, a Master's of Arts, or an MS, a Master of Science. There's also a Master of Education and a Master of Music. And those are usually 2-year programs. Sometimes there are accelerated master's programs. I know CSU has an accelerated Master's of Science in Information Science in School of Business, and it's like a year and a summer. And so you can kind of cram it all in. Some of these are just designed really for 2 years. So that's most typical. A terminal degree program, what that means is that you can't go higher than that in that particular field. So the PhD is typically the highest level of education you can get in humanities and social sciences, and also in many sciences as well. Of course, there's the medical degree, which we're not really talking about here because that's so specific. The JD, the Juris Doctorate, is the law degree. So that's what you go to law school for. And then the MBA, Masters of Business Administration, is the business school. And then in the arts, whether it's performing or visual arts or creative writing, the highest degree program there is the MFA, the Master of Fine Arts. Most MFA programs are 3-year programs. Questions to consider as you're thinking about graduate programs is, do you have to have a kind of a specialization in mind? So if you're applying, for example, to a Master's of Art in History, you might not have to have a specialization. You just know that you're really interested in, say, American history or world history. But if you're applying to PhD programs, the expectation is that they're going to want you to have a little bit more of a specialization. I should back up by saying that there are programs like the one that I went to at Santa Barbara that was an MA/PhD program. So I entered into the PhD program and got my master's along the way. It wasn't a separate program. So that's, if you know you want to do this and you're all in and you want to go to a PhD program, you want to look for those MA PhD programs, because essentially what they're doing is they're letting students in that they are confident can proceed on to the doctorate. So you want to think about specialization. If you know you're all in with history and you want to be a history professor, you might have to be a little bit more clear about what you want to study, because really they're letting you in to work with particular faculty. And they want to make sure that it's a good fit. So if you know you want to study American history, but you really want to look at Civil War American history, then you're going to be looking at really specifically for programs that have a good strength in that area. And the programs on the other side are really making sure that they are well equipped to support you as a student, both financially, but also with the faculty as well. We'll also want to think about work or research experience, if that's a requirement. Mostly in the humanities and social sciences, there is not the expectation that you're also going to have some real world work experience. But in business school and in other areas such as occupational therapy, there is an expectation that you will have had some real world work experience. And that's something to keep in mind. And usually they'll be pretty clear about that in their program on their websites. And then finally, you want to really think about, like, how many do I want to apply to? Usually that number is dictated by our financial situation. And every application, unlike the Common App, costs money. And so you have to be very mindful about what your budget is and how many you want to apply for. It's always a good idea to apply to as many as you can afford, and essentially get yourself set up so you have some choice. Just like undergrad, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, and you want to make sure you've got some choice, and you've got, when you do start to get those acceptances, that you've got some programs to weigh. And I think Kelsey and I both want to just ensure that you know that graduate programs want students. And I think we go into this thinking oh, it's a long shot. I don't even know if I'm going to get in. I saw that confidence was one of the ones that you were looking at. And we want to assure you that graduate programs want bright, awesome CSU students. And so you have to go into the process with that level of confidence that you're going to get in places and you're going to have choices. We want to definitely say it's competitive. It's a different kind of process than undergraduate, but going in with something, with a mentality that you have something to bring to the program is a really important mindset as you move forward in the next few months.
I am so excited by this flurry of responses and questions. You all are amazing and totally nerdy. Okay, so we have folks who are interested. We have some folks who are torn between 3 different kinds, like medical anthropology, public health, or medical history. We have some folks who are really, like a few folks who are thinking that they want to get their master's before a PhD. And that's actually a really great idea because PhDs are incredibly competitive. So if you're worried about your GPA or if you don't have a strong portfolio, getting a master's is a great way to get yourself really competitive for that position. And somebody that is interested in museum studies, boo, let's hang out, please. Yeah, so museum studies, it can fit into an MA. So you mentioned if it's MA or MFA. Roze, have you seen any MFA museum studies programs?
No.
I didn't think so.
Yeah,
So
that's an MA.
yeah, and I would really make sure that you get experience in a museum setting. Museums are more and more competitive, especially because they're looking for a variety of degrees. There's a lot of literature right now in decolonizing museums, and they want a variety of majors that aren't just in the museum film industry. So just know that there's a variety, and if you ever want to talk about it separately, please let me know. And then we will talk about gap year opportunities and what it looks like to attend and some pros and cons that you can think about. But as Roze said, like some of the programs are going to be more competitive if they're applied. So for example, the Masters of, let's go to the next slide, the Masters of Public Policy and Administration, that actually is a program that is geared toward working professionals. So it is in the liberal arts, but it still is really geared toward that experience. So if you're thinking, ooh, I really want to be competitive for that program in particular, pay attention to the field you're looking for and what will make you a competitive candidate. And as a sociology major, as this person said, it would be important to know what kind of program you're looking at, if it's research-based, if it's practice-based, and if you're still exploring, yes, gap years are a good idea to take some time and really figure that out. And we can talk more about that at the end when we get to that slide. But thank you for asking, everybody.
This next slide are CLA, College of Liberal Arts graduate programs that are still open and accepting applications for fall 20. And so there's just a handful here. If you know, for example, that you're like, I just had this epiphany and I really want to go and start a master's in English at CSU in the fall, reach out to that department and say, are you accepting any late applications? Because my guess is that they're being really flexible right now because of our current situation. And I mean, that's just the theme of the spring, right? Is flexibility and patience and acceptance. And so my guess is that if you really know, like, you want to start, actually, whether it's CSU or any other program, just shoot them an email, because my guess is that people are being a little bit more lenient with deadlines than they might normally be. And so I think that's a good rule of thumb is, as my dad always said to me, if you don't ask, you'll never get it. And so I think that that's just, it's not rude. There's usually every department has a professional who's there to help with their graduate school administration. So there's always a person, a real person with, real, human compassion on the other side of that.
Yeah, I think it's also important to look at this slide to realize that, so Roze mentioned that, for example, this says academic master's degrees, plan A or B versus C. So Roze, do you want to elaborate on what the differences are?
Sure, that's sort of a CSU terminology. And a plan A master's degree is usually a thesis is involved. And a plan B is that it's usually an independent study project. So fewer of your credits are devoted to a longer 6-credit thesis. And you don't have to decide on what your plan is in the application process. You usually decide that once you get into the program. As far as the plan C, that's a professional degree. And what that means, what professional degree means, is that it's leading you to a specific kind of job. So a Master's of Arts Leadership and Cultural Management is a job that would lead to, for example, being, going to work for the Bohemian Foundation and, doing arts administration. Museum studies does overlap with this a little bit, and some Masters of Arts administration do blend into museum studies. And so that's something to think about as well. But these programs that you have in front of you are very specific about what you're going to do with it, whereas a Master's of Philosophy is a little bit more open-ended. I will just say that this Master of Public Policy and Administration and the Master of Sports Management are brand new programs that are online only, and they're starting for the first time in the fall. And the Sports Management program is a partnership with the Denver Broncos.
So again, why I asked Roze to also elaborate is to demonstrate that there's a variety of programs even within our institution. So some of students that I talk to try to relate back to when they applied to undergraduate school in their graduate school process, and there are some similarities, but there are some differences. Like, you really need to get a little bit of clarity on what the curriculum really is, because it is pretty focused. And so really paying attention and making that informed choice, and knowing that every institution is structured differently. So it can be confusing, but using your resources is really helpful. I'm getting some really great questions in here about other things that I promise that we'll get to at the end about what will make you more competitive, but we're going to keep cruising just for the sake of time.
Okay. So I know that this is a biggie for everyone, and I just want to talk through it without making any promises. But there's a little bit of lingo involved in graduate school financial aid that feels a little bit different than undergraduate. So first of all, this is a big question in the self-reflection. How much can you afford, right? We want you to really think about graduate school in terms of how much you're going to get from them, right? And so often we don't go into undergraduate thinking like we're going to be funded, right? We're going to get a full ride scholarship. And that changes a little bit when you move into some of the competitive graduate school programs. Most programs will offer some kind of financial aid. And they try to do that to as many of their students as possible, because they know that that's the way that they are seen as desirable, and that's what keeps them competitive as well, is by giving their students money. And that can take a few different shapes. So graduate assistantships or teaching assistantships are primarily the most common ways that graduate programs fund students. So that means that you would be working with the faculty on a research project. That's called a research assistantship. The most typical thing is a teaching assistantship. So many people fund their graduate school by teaching or helping to teach undergraduate courses. I know that all of you have had a GTA in your time at CSU. That person is a GTA because they're getting funded for their graduate work and to help out with the department. And so that's essentially a service that the student is providing as a graduate student. And that usually is enough to, pay the rent and all of that. And then there's the sort of more special or more specialized and rarer kinds of graduate school funding. Fellowship is essentially what we call scholarships at the graduate level. So that's free money. That's what you want, is the fellowship. And that's usually can fund an entire year, sometimes an entire experience of graduate school. Fellowships are much less likely to be delivered at the master's level. Fellowships tend to be for graduate level study. Stipends are sometimes much smaller amounts, but again, free money. Sometimes you can get a stipend for supplies or books. Or sometimes you can get a stipend that's just, a cost of living stipend. So it's not the extensive fellowship. And then there's tuition waivers, and that could be something for like an in-state student tuition waiver at CSU. You'll get kind of a discount for being in-state. And that's, again, every program should have all of this listed on their website, and any program that doesn't list their financial aid and is cagey about answering these questions, it's not good. So you want to make sure that you get the answers to these questions. These are very important questions and considerations in your process, and programs should be able to answer these really clearly. This is how many graduate assistantships we give. This is how much money we give. and this is how many tuition waivers we give for out-of-state students. There should be no gray area there. So the question to consider as you're thinking about finances is, how competitive are they? So if you're going to apply for a graduate assistantship or a teaching assistantship and they're like, yeah, we have them, it's awesome. And then you realize they only have four. So those are the questions that you can ask the program is how much are they for? How many students get them? Some programs are very committed to only letting in students they can fully fund. And those are obviously programs that you want to seek out.
Awesome. So also as a quick response to a question that came up in the chat, there are also a variety of different kinds of programs. So sometimes someone asked, can I work while going to grad school? And again, assistantships and teaching assistantships are the most popular, but there are plenty of different kinds of programs. Like some are online for totally working professionals, others are part-time and maybe you can complete the degree over a longer period of time. But each program is structured differently and it usually depends on the focus and type of program you're looking at. And yes, going abroad for grad school is an option. We don't have a ton of resources on here specifically about it, but next week we're doing a session that might be relevant for you, and I'll wait till the end to tell you more.
Awesome. Yeah, I worked every summer at a restaurant. I mean, that was just how I kind of paid my rent. I lived in a really expensive part of California, and I had to work during the summer. So, and then during the school year, I knew plenty of people who worked as like, you know, baristas or whatever. So people absolutely work their way through grad school in that kind of industry that feels flexible, usually like food service or something like that. Okay, exams. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. The GRE website, make sure you screenshot of this. What you want to do is you make sure that the programs to which you're applying list their expectations for the exam. So they will say, you must take the GRE, and then you must have taken it by this particular date. So that's going to help you in making that decision. But most programs in the humanities and social science require it. I'm noticing that programs are starting to let go of that requirement a little bit. So you always want to make sure. So the GRE, let me just explain what it is. It's a standardized exam, much like the SAT or the ACT. It's about 3 hours and 45 minutes long. It assesses quantitative reasoning, verbal reasoning, and writing analysis. So that's like critical thinking. So a lot like the SAT. It's not particularly fun, and it's kind of a drag and like a rite of passage. Typically, in a typical year, the GREs are administered at testing sites all year round, every few weeks or every couple weeks. But this semester, they're allowing for at-home proctored exams. So make sure to check the deadlines for the school. This GRE website allows you to have 2 free practice exams, and that's for the GRE. Some programs for the PhD will require what's called a subject exam, subject specific, like there's a literature exam for English or the history exam for history. And then other professional programs, business, law, and medical have their own standardized exams as well.
Typically GRE scores are good for about, I think it's 5 years, right? It's 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
All the information, it's definitely 5 years. So if you look at the website, the ETS website, I'm telling you, it'll give you a whole new world. And you do not have to go to graduate school the semester after taking it. So actually a lot of students, when they're really fresh in school and they feel really good, they take it while they're still in college, and then their scores are good for 5 years so that they can take it later. But that's totally a personal decision. And if you want more resources on that, please let us know. Half my conversations about the GRE are about what do I do, how long do I take it, etc. But yeah, so get in touch with us and make sure you take a practice test so you can see where you're at and go from there.
I just want to add one more thing, and I can't see the chat box, but if I could imagine that somebody's writing how important are the GREs. And I think that really depends. I feel like most programs, you know, obviously the higher up you get in your education, they're doing much more of a holistic review of the student, right? They're looking at your transcripts, your writing sample, your letters, all of that. It's become so much a part of a larger package that the exams hold much less weight than they might have at the level where they're used to cut students out. And so again, that's a question you can ask the specific program. I have to tell you, I did quite badly on the quantitative portion of the GRE, like really, really not well at all. And somehow I still got into a pretty good grad program. So I felt really good about that because I thought they were really looking at the other stuff that mattered way more than that quantitative.
Yeah. I was in the 16th percentile when I first took a practice exam for quantitative and in the 90th percentile for qualitative. So I say that only because it took a long time. I did all the wrong things. That's part of why I'm a career coach. But you can improve your scores and using those different things. GRE is one thing that's taken in a package. So like your essay, your resume, your GPA, it all, like a good GRE score is a good way to start offsetting a GPA. But again, it depends on the program and what their priorities are. If you don't have a good essay, then it's probably not going to stand out overall. So they do look at you as all aspects, and they include your identities as a piece of that too. Not everyone has the same access to resources, and some programs really prioritize that with diversity statements. Wow, I'm gonna need some tea. But anyway, Roze, take it away and tell us about recommendation letters.
Okay, so almost all programs will require letters of recommendation. And so I just want to hit a few of these high points here. First of all, I think that when we're students and we're asking faculty to write letters, it can be a little bit terrifying because you're asking them to do another thing. And we all know that faculty are so busy. But it's part of our professional identity is to mentor students. And we really like writing letters of a recommendation because it's something, especially for programs that we know, because it's something that we know really well. And so that's just just get that out of your head that that's something to be scared of, because that is really part of our jobs, that it's a professional expectation. As you're thinking about who might write letters of recommendation, you should really think about asking faculty who are in areas that you want to study. Now, if you haven't had any classes with faculty in that area, that's okay too. Don't freak out about that. But what's most important is that the faculty that you're asking know your academic work pretty well and can actually speak specifically about how you are as a student and your potential for graduate level work. That's what's most important. So generally speaking, you don't necessarily include a letter from an employer unless it's relevant to your area of study. So for example, if you were to go into museum studies and you have a letter from the museum that you were working at, that would be totally appropriate because it's relevant to your area of study. But if you're working at, I don't know, the vet hospital as a vet tech and you're applying to English PhD programs, that might be less relevant. So the main thing that you want to think about is asking faculty well in advance of the deadline. That's just a courtesy. And providing your faculty with some tools to write the best letter possible. Whenever I get a letter of request or a request from a student, usually it's an email, I say, yes, I would love to write you a letter. However, I want to talk to you in person if I can. Obviously, that wouldn't happen this semester. Like, let's go have coffee. Let's talk about what your goals are. And I'd like you to provide me with a few things. And so I'm giving you this list because it would be very impressive to a faculty if you came with us. So that is a draft of your statement of purpose. I'm going to talk about the statement in a minute. An unofficial transcript. So especially if you've got great grades, you want to make sure that your faculty know that. A resume or kind of a list of the kinds of cool things you've been doing while you've been in college or outside of college, and also a list of programs to which you're applying and due dates. That will help your faculty stay organized. So that's really important. We recommend that you waive your right to see the letter, so there's a box you tick on the application process. And then once it's all over, asking them to write a thank you note. One thing I'll also say is that if it's getting close to the deadline and the institution doesn't have the letter yet, it's totally fine for you to reach out to the faculty and just remind them, like, hey, this deadline's coming up, just want to make sure that you're still on target to get it in.
Absolutely. As another note, so someone asked, what if I'm not planning to go to graduate school for a couple years? When
Yeah,
should I ask for the letter? I would say make sure that you talk to your faculty before you graduate. So say, hi, I want to let you know this is my intention. Keep talking to me, and they can let you know their preference. So some folks are like, great, I'm going to write it now while I know you, and then we'll keep going. But I would say no matter what, please keep in touch with your faculty once you graduate. Like, they're really invested in your success as alumni, and they will remember you better if you keep a relationship with them. They're not just a
yeah,
person. So
yep.
keep in touch, but talk to them before you graduate. If Roze has any other tips, please share.
I would say that probably typically they're not going to, because they're not going to give you the letter. They're going to send it to the school. So they're probably not going to write it until you actually apply, because guess what happens? Some folks end up not applying, and then they want to make sure they have the most relevant information. So I would just say, ask them before you graduate. Every few months, check in with an email and just say, hey, how's it going? I'm still thinking about this. It's just kind of keeping in touch, and I think keeping it on the radar and keeping that relationship going. Okay. This is a hugely content-filled slide, so I'm really not going to go deep into this. But most programs will want some kind of essay, which is sometimes called a statement of purpose, statement of intent, statement of interest. Basically, the program sometimes will give you a prompt, and sometimes it'll just say statement of purpose. Basically, they'll give you a page limit. Usually it's like 1 to 2 pages. If this is a document you should spend a good amount of time drafting and having folks read and taking to the writing center and having Kelsey look at it and having your faculty look at it, because there's a lot writing on this. These are the kinds of documents that are very terrifying, frankly, because we've never written them before. And so the more eyes you have on it, the better. But basically, the way you want to think about this is as a narrative of your academic journey up to this point, why you're interested in that specific program, and what you hope to accomplish with that degree. It's really crucial that you indicate a good understanding of what advanced area of study in that field is. So if you're applying to a
Research.
master's in political science, and you're just talking about how much you love following, media and social media, they're going to be like, well, I see a disconnect between what you're talking about you love and that what actually we do in political science. So you want to make sure you have a good understanding going into the process, but that you write about it, that you know what research and writing in that particular field looks like. Tailor your statement to the specific program. What basically I tell people to do is write one and then tweak it for various programs. And that's where the detail-oriented mindset is really important, making sure that you didn't accidentally say this on that one. So you want to talk about your own personal experiences. You want that personality for sure to shine through, but don't spend a lot of time on autobiography. Unfortunately, that really turns committees off if you spend a lot of that. In my field, a lot of it is my mom took me to the library when I was 3 years old every day. And, there's a lot of parents taking me to the library ones. And so that's awesome. But what I want to know is are you going to be able to be well equipped to write a 30-page research paper in something really specific? So, you want to grab your reader, you want to reflect on your stories, and that's all really important. And you want to balance the sort of personal and the professional, but make sure that it's reviewed by somebody else.
A brief question. So some folks were saying, how do I even start? And if you're wondering, when I'm sitting down with a student to get started, I have them start with the first question that the essay asks you to respond to, answer their questions, but write down the question. One of them is, why do I want to go into this field? Or why this grad program? And I want you to put that on a paper and ask yourself why 3 times. So for example, there's someone here who's really interested in research. If you say, I like research because I like research, why do I like research? What impact do I want my research to have? What are the different research projects at this institution that I'm interested in? What are faculty advisors that I'm really invested in? Because that can really shape it. Maybe you think on paper this program's really amazing, but then you talk to the faculty member and they're a little, you don't connect with them. So there's a lot of different layers to consider, but figure out what your top priorities are, whether it's that personal connection or the resources, and speak to that in your pieces, but also make sure that you address those and that can help you with your decision-making process.
Okay, and then many programs will ask for a writing sample. Essentially, that's something you've already written. Usually it's something that you've written, has been graded, and has been reviewed, and you did really well on. So writing sample, like you got an A on the, and you felt really proud about it. Sometimes you can take something you've written and spruce it up, absolutely revise it. And then sometimes you can do, the writing sample should be specific in that particular field. It should really represent your best work and absolutely should be free of any sort of grammatical errors of fact or errors of fact. Speak faculty member for which you wrote the paper and say, is this a good writing sample? I love it when students do that because I can say like, yeah, but it's way too long. Like you need to cut it because they're asking for a 10-page paper and this is a 20-page paper. And I can give feedback on how to cut it and what that looks like. And you shouldn't just turn, even if you got an A paper, don't just turn that paper in as a PDF. You want to make a new document, take the class off of it. You want to really present it as a very clean copy. For many fields, the visual arts and the performing arts, you're going to require portfolio of your work, artist statement, other submitted materials might be required. So that's very specific to the.
Okay, so also some of you might be dance students and you're preparing a reel. So I do encourage you to please lean into your faculty there because Roze and I are not dance folks. So they will know what techniques, what companies will speak to, etc. But I don't know about you all, but I love me some Marie Kondo. She talks about the magic of tidying up on Netflix and how we can organize our lives in different ways. So all of this was a lot of information, right? Like Roze and I went over several components. Some of you are like, okay, I already know what I want to go into, but I can't pick a program. Great. You need to start doing some research on programs. What are the curriculums? What are they offering? And getting all that in one place to organize it might really help. So if you want this sample Excel spreadsheet, please let me know afterward, like put in the chat box and I can email it to you directly. But this is one way to stay organized when you're researching programs and then application wise, like tracking the process, right? So like, did I submit this? Did I not? Ooh, do I need to follow up with that faculty member? It's easy to get lost. And so just make sure, yes, I can. Thanks for asking. Yay. Okay. Lots of people want the spreadsheet. Woo. Okay. So I'll make sure to email it to the participants that were here today. But again, just one way to stay organized, but find a system that works for you. This is overwhelming, or it can be. And so this is one way that you will thank me later, boo. Like, please make this for yourself, not for me. Okay. Yay. Okay, I'll send it to everybody afterwards. But we brought this up earlier and I definitely want to address it. So some folks, I don't know if you want to raise your hands. How many folks are intimidated when they hear gap year opportunity? Yeah, okay. And you can use the raise your hand function too at the bottom of the screen. Okay, I see a couple raised hands. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so yes, usually folks that I talk to are like, wait, is there a gap year? What does that mean? And sometimes gap years become the rest of your life, and that's okay too. So gap years are any kind of experience that you want to gain, whether it's taking extra credits at an institution or gaining work or research experience or a service experience. That you're going to take before you go into your graduate or school program. There's some benefits for that, but if you're like, I don't even know what that is or what it would mean, again, go back to that original career question I asked you about what skill you want to develop, and if grad school is the place to do that, or if there's another way you can also develop that skill. If you're not sure still, maybe you need to get more exposure in labs to different research projects to see what's a good fit for you, or different research things so you can really figure out your question. So get that research experience, and here's some different ways you can do that. So Handshake is the #1 place I want you to look. If you're wondering, I'm an alum or I'm a student, where are employers looking? Employers who ask to recruit our students post jobs and internships on that website. So please check that out, and I can show you where that is at the end of this. Learn about teaching abroad in next week's seminar. So next week, we're doing an international/global job search session, and if you're like, ooh, that sounds cool, please come. It is part of the Virtual Career Conference. And lastly, talk to your faculty in your department. Again, Roze said, how are they going to know unless you ask? So there's going to be a lot of uncertainty right now across higher ed about research and employment opportunities, but it doesn't hurt to ask and put that name in the ring, because when opportunities come up later, they might be able to have more information for you. And next week, you can also connect with employers. So next week, we have 35 employers that you can register to meet up with, and they are hiring between now and August. So pay attention to that and take a look at, again, City Year, for example, is a service experience, and they will be here next week. So don't be shy about reaching out and connecting. Here's some pros and cons, right? Things that folks need. More time to explore. Maybe you're burned out. Oops, like maybe the gap year can help with that. And maybe you want to figure out if this is really what you want to do. Networking still happens even in the workplace, and there's a few less student loans if you don't have that funding opportunity. It is easier to lose contact, or maybe you have a difficult job search right now due to the current situation, or you may lose momentum. But if you get clear on your goals, again, what is something I would want to learn or gain during this time? And whatever that is, make that your priority and then shape your experiences to align with that. Because maybe some of you apply to grad school and don't get in, right? So having a gap year is not a failure. It's actually a really great opportunity for a lot of students that they don't consider because they're afraid. So I just want to make sure that you are aware of the options and that there's a lot of choices. And sometimes, yes, maybe you get into grad school, but you find another opportunity. You can defer, oftentimes you can defer your entrance into a grad program, but it depends. So not all programs do that, but you can always ask and then make an informed decision. Okay. So again, decisions, and we have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to be mindful of that. But sometimes, again, when students come in and they're like, I have a million choices, like I don't know where to start. There is no one path for your life. Maybe you go to grad school right now. Maybe you go in 5 years. Maybe you never go. There's no wrong. And so sometimes when folks feel stuck, I encourage you to do something called a mind map and imagine 3 possible lives for yourself. So for example, maybe you start in the middle with a question that says, what is something I'm curious to learn about or gain experience in next? And then you draw little bubbles that build off of that. What are your next steps? Who are you going to turn to? What do you need in order to get there, right? And realizing these possibilities sometimes makes it feel less like you're trapped or that there's a lot of fear. So even if you're not sure about grad school, this is one way that you can help process that. And there's also tons of other tools if you wanted to come to a career education appointment with a career education manager or someone in your field, we've got your back. Awesome. Okay. So again, grad schools are lucky to have you, right? You are going to make a big decision of like, do I want this in my life? Not only do they want me, right? And so some of the resources that we encourage you to turn to, again, faculty, whether they're in the graduate program you're applying to or your current institution, they're going to have a wealth of knowledge and play different roles, right? So the folks in your current institution, they're here for you. They want to talk to you about these options throughout the entire process, and they're going to be your biggest advocate through that and your information source. Graduate program staff, however, are also another incredible resource. So these are folks who are paid to answer questions about what's financial aid, what's admissions. Hey, can you connect me with a current student there because I want to see if this is a good fit? Hey, what's your placement rate? It's not weird to ask those folks questions. They want to talk to you. So don't ever be shy and realize that there's different structures and programs across the world. So be aware that there's different communication patterns. And the Career Center, so whether it's the CV, the resume, the grad personal statement, the do I even want to do this? What's a career goal? We've got your back. You're not alone in that. And of course, current grad students, they were pretty successful if they're currently in the program, right? So they did something right, and they can probably give you real insights into what it's like. And sometimes when grad program staff set you up with current grad students, they're talking to the folks who are really pumped about the program, right? So if you want some real perspectives as well, maybe talk to alumni from the programs you're curious about by going to LinkedIn. And if you're curious about how to do that, come to a drop-in and we can show you how to find alumni for the programs that you're applying to so that you can get those real perspectives. Roze, anything to add?
No.
Okay, great. So lastly, if you're like, all this stuff is really cool, but I'm overwhelmed, totally fine. For the entire virtual career conference and beyond, Monday through Friday until the end of the semester, we have drop-in appointments from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. that you can totally ask any of these questions about, or anything else. If you're like, maybe that gap year, what was that about? We've got you. We also have 45-minute appointments with this person and with Sam Evans, who is a career educator in our office. So if you have any questions about what the future, we've got your back. And if you're like, but I don't want to do any of those things, okay, cool. Maybe you just really love webinars. Every Wednesday, starting in April, we started this What the Future webinar series to see what people thought. The first 10 minutes is a check-in. So it's genuinely, hi, how you doing? And then we get into the topic of the day. And all of the topics were generated from students in telling us what they wanted to learn. So if you want to share in the chat box what things you would love to learn before the end of the semester, feel free to pop it in there. Next week's session, as I mentioned, is the Global International Job Search with Education Abroad. So you can get some great resources there for that. All of the videos are saved on the College of Liberal Arts YouTube page. Okay.
You mean while you're in the program?
Yeah, because I know that you can choose between the special project or the thesis.
Yeah, so it is depending on the program. So my program that I went to at Santa Barbara, there were exams. That was essentially the hurdle that you had to go through to get to the PhD. So it really just depends. Some programs will ask you to write a thesis on the way to the PhD. And so it really depends. And a thesis should, if you're planning on getting a PhD, a thesis is probably a pretty good idea, because it's sort of that moment where you're like, can I sustain interest in a research question for a lot of pages? Because that's ultimately training wheels essentially for the PhD, which is what you're going to be doing at a much larger scale. So a thesis that's helpful for you. The other thing I didn't talk about, because it's very specific to humanities, but a lot of humanities programs require language proficiency, even in English. I got my degree in English literature and had to pass 2 different language exams along the way during grad school.
And again, here's our contact information. So if you have any questions or concerns or fears or we've got your back, and here's our information. And I'm briefly gonna make sure, again, my email blazoned into your brain, okay? So if you have any questions, particularly College of Liberal Arts students, if I'm not the person, or if you're not in the liberal arts, it's okay. I will make sure you find the person who is your person. So don't ever be shy about reaching out, and we'll make sure that you get to the right person, because you're not alone. And Roze is also here as a resource academically. She is here as an amazing mentor on campus, but she's an incredible resource, and we're lucky to have her today. Yeah. Okay, so to wrap up this session, I am going to share with you all, can you see this slide? Or this website. Great. Okay, so again, I put this link at the very, very beginning, so feel free to scroll up. But this is where all the videos are going to get stored after the conference. So you can see where that is. And we still have an entire rest of the conference. So tomorrow, wow, really? Tomorrow we have a session called Let's Talk About Money, where you can talk with a real financial advisor who will give you insights into how to make a budget and save. And again, so we have tons of events coming up. Go to Handshake, events, it's all in here. If you go to fairs, you can just see the summary. So fairs, here we are. And then here's the summary of events. So tomorrow, you'll see Let's Talk About Money, perspectives from the graduating class. So that's for seniors in graduate school right now or undergrad, so that you can talk to career coaches, I'll be there, about what can you expect in this next time, and interviewing from a distance. So don't be shy. And again, all these sessions next week, these are all hiring employers who, for the first 15 minutes, talk to you and be like, what do you want to know about our opportunities, etc. And then there's time for Q&A. So lots of different experiences, lots of opportunities, and we're here to support you. So our only request is that you change the world, that you keep us posted, and we will see you next week if you decide to come. But thank you so much, everybody.